Through the eye-level camera angle, a universal style of dress and an average-seeming house, I led the audience to relate to the characters. This perhaps left them feeling vulnerable, which would make the introduction to disequilibrium more effective. My audience research showed that having the characters dressed in a way generic of their age group was preferred, perhaps showing that relating to the characters were important to the audience, as it allows the audience to get more engrossed in the film. This would make the scenes in which pictures of unknown teenagers are shown with their faces scribbled out, and the girl is dragged from the room, particularly resounding with the target audience. In referring to props and narrative theory, I showed the complication through one of the characters going missing, which was consistent with the trailers I had analysed. For example, in 28 Days Later, the complication is shown when the main character wakes up to find London deserted. I turned off the lights and used the torch for these scenes, as the initiation of negative events is conventionally marked with darkness. An example of this is The Last Exorcism, in which the girl becomes possessed in a barn at night. I started the music when my male character climbed the stairs to search for the missing girl, as this was the end of the equilibrium and the start of the disequilibrium. I used tense sound clips such as stab scrape to create a sense of disorientation and suspense. I found that it was not conventional to use music in horror trailers, but rather to build these in intention to read a climax to accompany a montage of film, which becomes shorter and faster. This conventionally turns into a beat towards the climax of the montage, which I achieved by editing the clip Metal Crash 2 so that sounds overlapped. I based this part of my music on the end of the Last Exorcism trailer, as the sound grows in intensity and rhythm. This was consistent with my audience research, as it was shown in a questionnaire that they would like the focus to be on the action rather than the emotional aspects of the film. The use of Metal Crash 2 were particularly effective in a scene in which the possessed girl walks towards the camera, creating a sense of panic as the audience views her approach through the victim's point of view. I started this montage with a shot of the male character attempting to open a door, showing his fear and desperation. This, and the shots following this, were only up to 5 seconds long, therefore building pace. Up until this I had used fades and cross dissolves to create smooth transitions, but for most of my montage I used straight cuts to make it seem abrupt and jerky. I followed this shot with a killer's POV shot of shoes walking through a forest at night. This used horror conventions of wilderness and darkness, as well as intriguing the audience, as up until then the trailer had always been from the victim's point of view. This technique was used in the Nightmare on Elm Street trailer, when Kruger's shadow is shown preceding him as he walks up a staircase. I also used the killer's point of view in a shot in the montage of victims running through a field. The camera is handheld and shaky, and seems to be chasing after them, giving the effect of a killer pursuing the girls. The close-up of the girl looking at the camera, seemingly possessed, was inspired by shots of the possessed girl in The Last Exorcism. As my treatment also involved a girl's possession by a spirit, I found The Last Exorcism very inspiring in creating my trailer. I then used an additive dissolve with From the Creators of 18 over the shot, as I thought that the image of the possessed girl was representative of my treatment, and therefore could potentially be associated with my promotional package as iconography. This was followed by a shot of the same girl sitting up in bed, gasping, implying that she has woken up from a nightmare. As the same girl was shown only a moment ago possessed by a spirit, her innocence and shock in this shot provides an effective contrast. This applies to my treatment, as it is a cliché of horror that individuals who have been possessed cannot remember what they have done. This also references Bart's Enigma code, as the audience is worrying how this transition has taken place. This also uses an additive dissolve with the title Guilt. Through my internet research, I learnt that more gothic locations were conventional in horror trailers, for example, an isolated forest. This was shown in my audience research, who said they would prefer more gothic locations such as darkened basements. However, as my target audience was teenagers and I wanted their characters to be relatable, I chose to challenge this and use the typical house as my location, as realistically this is where teenagers would spend time, and I wanted the characters to be credible. To show the aspects of prop structure, the struggle, I used the forest as a location for some of my shots. However, during the equilibrium, I thought it showed the transference more effectively if the trailer started in a place where the characters felt safe and comfortable. The use of the forest referenced aspects of the gothic genre, which is often referenced in the horror genre.